My daughter put my face on a poster at her wedding with 2 words, "Not welcome." It was a brutal stab in the back for my only child, the person I cherished most. I turned my back on the celebration, leaving a lifetime of happy memories behind. But just a few hours later, my phone lit up with 81 frantic calls. Her shocking act of betrayal had just detonated a bomb she never saw coming. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The sharp, cool light of my phone cut through the cozy glow of my reading lamp. It vibrated on the worn leather of my armchair, a harsh and demanding buzz that shattered the calm March evening I had built around myself in my Chicago apartment. The book I was reading fell to the floor as I grabbed for the device, my glasses reflecting the screen's insistent glare. Dad. Clara's face filled the display, her smile so bright it seemed to generate its own light. "I have the most amazing news. I'm getting engaged." My teacup stopped halfway to my mouth. Over her shoulder I could see what appeared to be a luxury condo. Granite countertops, huge windows showing off Miami's sparkling skyline. "Honey, that's—" I began, but she pushed her left hand up to the camera. A diamond reflected every light source in her condo, scattering tiny rainbows across her beaming face. "Look at this ring, Dad. Have you ever seen anything so beautiful?" Before I could properly reply, a man's face slid into the frame next to hers. Tall, with a chiseled jaw and perfectly coiffed dark hair. His smile was the kind you see in a men's cologne ad. "Mr. Reed." His voice had a smooth, practiced confidence that my years in sales had taught me to be wary of. "I'm Julian Croft, and I can assure you your daughter will be the happiest woman alive." "Dad, I'm so thrilled for you. Tell me about Julian," I said, trying to reflect their high energy while sizing up this stranger who had seemingly stolen my daughter's heart. "He's a visionary in Web3 ventures, Dad. He has such incredible plans for the future." Clara was practically vibrating with excitement as she talked. "Julian's firm manages blockchain solutions, NFT marketplaces. The market has been unpredictable lately," Julian cut in smoothly, his hand coming to rest on Clara's shoulder. The gesture seemed more proprietary than loving, but my strategy involves diversifying across multiple platforms, fintech, AI development, and some blue-chip stocks for stability. I noted that his eyes never really settled on mine through the screen. They kept flicking to something just out of frame, perhaps another screen, maybe just checking the time. A pricey-looking watch glinted on his wrist, but the way he angled it seemed intentional, like he was showing it off. "When's the big day?" I asked. "May 20th, Clara exclaimed. "I know it's fast, but Julian found an incredible venue that had a sudden opening, the Biltmore in Miami. Can you believe it?" 2 months. They were getting married in 2 months. "That's moving pretty quickly," I commented carefully. Julian's smile became a fraction tighter. "When it's right, sir. Besides, Clara deserves a fairy tale wedding, and a venue like that doesn't stay available for long." Through the screen, I watched him idly twist a thick gold ring on his pinky, a nervous tick that clashed with his confident image. His other hand stayed firmly on Clara's shoulder, his thumb rubbing small circles that felt more like a claim than a comfort. "Julian has been so amazing with everything," Clara gushed, leaning into his touch. "He's coordinating all the vendors, all the planning. I don't have to lift a finger. That should have made me feel relieved. Instead, a cold knot formed in my stomach. "Well, I'm looking forward to meeting you in person, Julian," I said, injecting warmth into my voice. "The feeling is mutual, Mr. Reed. I've heard wonderful things about you." After some more breathless talk about floral arrangements and caterers, they finally ended the call. I remained in my leather chair as the room grew darker, the phone's screen fading to black. My book was forgotten on the rug, and my tea was now cold. Something about Julian was deeply unsettling. I just couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was how he controlled the conversation while pretending to be respectful. or how his designer clothes seemed just a little too perfect, too crisp, like an actor in costume rather than a man in his own life. I saw my own reflection in the dark screen, my doubts multiplying in the shadows. 13 restless nights had passed since that video call. When Julian called, requesting a man-to-man chat, I accepted, driven by a mix of curiosity and a deep-seated need to figure out what was bothering me about him. The steakhouse in downtown Chicago was precisely the kind of place I would have imagined Julian selecting. Dim lighting, dark wood, the kind of quiet ambiance that came with $100 steak. I found him at a secluded table, somehow appearing anxious despite his flawlessly tailored charcoal suit. "Mr. Reed, thank you for meeting me." He stood to shake my hand. His grip was strong but faintly clammy. "Please have a seat. Can I get you anything? A coffee is all I need." I observed his face as we sat down opposite each other. Up close, his polished exterior seemed more brittle, like a thin layer of gloss over cheap particle board. "How are the wedding plans coming along?" I began. "Fantastic. In fact, that's related to why I wanted to talk," he fiddled with, his water glass, turning it in perfect quarter rotations. "Can I speak to you in confidence?" The question felt like a carefully set trap. "Of course," I replied, though my gut was screaming at me. Julian leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "My portfolio is facing a temporary liquidity issue due to market fluctuations. It's nothing major, a routine SEC inquiry into one of my funds. It should be cleared up in a few months," but he paused, letting out a sigh that sounded rehearsed. "Clara is dreaming of a perfect wedding, and I can't stand the thought of letting her down." I watched his eyes as he spoke. They were fixed on a point just past my ear, never making direct contact. "The venue requires the full balance up front," he said. "The caterer, the florist, all of it. It's more cash than I can access right now without incurring huge penalties on my restricted assets." "How much do you need, Julian?" $75,000 should cover all outstanding costs. I'll have every penny back to you by the end of the year, with significant interest, of course." He reached into his blazer and produced a folder of what appeared to be official financial statements. "These show my asset valuation, well over $3 million, just temporarily tied up." The document seemed authentic, filled with official-looking watermarks and dense financial jargon, but the way he presented them so readily, like a poker player revealing a stacked hand, made my stomach turn. "Mr. Reed, I know this is a huge ask, but I love your daughter more than anything. I just want to give her the perfect start to our new life." He was convincing. I had to give him that. The plea seemed sincere, the paperwork was plausible, and $75,000, while a lot of money wouldn't ruin me financially. "All right," I found myself saying, "but Clara can never know we had this conversation. Absolutely not. It would devastate her to think I couldn't provide for her." Relief washed over his face so instantly it almost seemed genuine. "I can't tell you what this means to me, sir." I wrote the check slowly, my pen hovering over the signature. Julian's eyes followed the pen's every move like a predator stalking its prey. The second I tore the check from the book, he practically snatched it, folding it neatly into his wallet. "You won't regret this, Mr. Reed. Clara is going to have the most spectacular wedding Miami has ever witnessed." He left right after that, claiming he had urgent calls with suppliers. I sat by myself in the pricey steakhouse, my coffee forgotten, as Chicago's elite chattered around me about mergers and summer homes. My phone felt like a lead weight in my pocket. I knew I should call Clara, ask pointed questions about Julian's business, perform the basic due diligence any sensible person would before handing over $75,000. Instead, I just drank my cold coffee and went home burdened by a secret that already felt like a colossal mistake. 6 days had passed since that steakhouse meeting, each one feeling longer and heavier than the one before. I drifted through my Chicago apartment like a stranger in my own home. The phone was always within reach. Every corner of the apartment seemed to taunt me. The immaculate kitchen where I hardly ate, The living room where I couldn't focus on a single page. The bedroom where I only found sleep in short, anxious bursts. Eleanor's picture watched me from the bedside table. Her kind smile was a memory from a happier time. I held the silver frame, my thumb tracing the outline of her face on the glass. Eleanor always told me, "Your gut feeling is more important than someone's smooth words," I whispered to her photo. She would have seen right through him. Eleanor never fell for charming words. She never let charisma blind her to a person's character. When Clara was a teenager and wanted to go out with that boy on the motorcycle, Eleanor ran a background check that would have made a private investigator proud. But Eleanor was gone, and I was making choices that felt like a betrayal of every lesson she'd taught me about protecting our daughter. The phone buzzed on the table. Clara's face smiled up from the screen. She had her mother's perceptive eyes, the same eyes that were now clouded by infatuation with a man who was likely a complete fraud. I dialed her number, then hung up. Then I dialed again. "Dad, great timing. I just left the bakery after the cake tasting. How are the wedding plans?" I asked, trying for a casual tone, but my voice was tight with stress. "Amazing, Dad. Julian is a genius with details. He's managing absolutely everything. The music, the photographer, he's even coordinating with the hotel's event staff. All I have to do is show up and look pretty." Every cheerful word was like a tiny pinprick to my conscience. Julian was orchestrating her dream wedding with her money, my money. "Clara," I began, then paused. My promise to Julian felt like a gag in my mouth. "Are you sure you know Julian well enough?" "Of course, Dad. What kind of question is that?" Her tone shifted, a note of defensiveness creeping in. I could hear her moving around her condo, likely looking at swatches or wedding magazines. Just, "Father's concerned. You've only been with him for a few months. 7 months, actually. And when you know, you know. Time is irrelevant." She gave a little laugh, but it didn't sound genuine. "You're the one who taught me to trust my gut, remember? And my gut tells me Julian is the one. The one." The phrase echoed in my head like a siren. Nothing is ever perfect, especially not people who claim to be. "I'm sure you're right, honey. I'm so excited to dance with you at your wedding." After we hung up, I sat at my dining table and took out the old leather-bound journal Eleanor had given me decades ago. Most of its pages were empty. I was never one to write things down. But tonight was different. I had to document this choice, this moment where I put my faith in Julian's promise over my own screaming instincts. March 9th, 2025. Gave Julian $75,000 for wedding costs. Clara doesn't know. Something feels deeply wrong, but I gave my word. Eleanor would call me a fool, but being a good dad sometimes means trusting your child's judgment, even when it terrifies you. I shut the journal and put it back in the drawer. Outside my window, Chicago was alive with the sounds of the evening. Couples returning from dinner, families on their way to the movies, the steady pulse of normal people living their normal lives. For the first time in years, I envied their simple, uncomplicated problems. The wedding was 5 weeks away. 5 weeks for Julian to prove me wrong, or for me to learn just how catastrophically I had misread the man about to marry my daughter. I switched off the light and went to bed, taking Eleanor's photo with me. If I was walking into a disaster, at least I wouldn't be walking alone. 3 days had gone by since I wrote that entry in Eleanor's journal. Now I was standing outside Joe's Stone Crab, Miami's legendary seafood restaurant, peering through the large windows as Julian and Clara clinked champagne glasses. The early flight from O'Hare had left me exhausted and red-eyed, but I'd managed to shower and change into my best suit, a classic Brooks Brothers that suddenly felt inadequate under the restaurant's ambient glow. "Dad!" Clara rushed towards me, in a vibrant teal dress that likely cost more than my monthly utilities. Her engagement ring flashed as she gave me a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and pure joy. Julian stood up slowly from their prime table. His every move was deliberate, almost rehearsed. The suit he had on, a light gray linen affair, looked like it was tailored for a fashion shoot. My $75,000 was clearly being spent. "Mr. Reed, it's so wonderful to see you again." His handshake was firm and held for a moment too long, his thumb pressing into my knuckles with a subtle assertion of dominance. "Please, join us." Julian indicated the empty chair, but had positioned himself to have the most commanding view of the restaurant. I went ahead and ordered a bottle of wine, a Sancerre, that I think you'll find pairs exquisitely with their crab claws. Before I could even reply, he was flagging down the sommelier, diving into a technical conversation about terroir and minerality that instantly made me feel like an outsider at my own daughter's celebration. "The menu is seasonal, of course," Julian said without offering me the leather-bound menu, "but I'd highly recommend the grilled grouper, unless you'd prefer something a bit more conventional." The word conventional was laced with condescension. "Dad is actually very adventurous," Clara chimed in, reaching over to pat my hand. "Remember that time you tried the escargot in Paris? Mr. Reed, do you still balance a checkbook?" How quaint. Julian's smile was fixed, but his eyes held a glint of amusement. My jaw clenched. "Sometimes the old ways are the most reliable." Of course, though I imagine it must be a hassle to track your spending without a good banking app. He leaned back, draping an arm possessively over the back of Clara's chair. "Clara, your father probably remembers when Apple stock was just a few dollars a share, right, sir?" "Julian, perhaps we could talk about something else," I said, trying to maintain a level tone. "My apologies. I sometimes forget that not everyone is as comfortable with the new financial landscape." He turned to Clara with a look of mock concern. "Honey, should we try to explain blockchain basics, or do you think that would just be confusing?" Clara giggled. She actually giggled as if I were some out-of-touch relic who needed to be shielded from complex ideas. The server arrived with our appetizers, a beautiful platter of stone crab claws that Julian began dissecting with an air of expertise while lecturing Clara on market trends. Every so often, he would toss me a small comment. "You might find this interesting, Mr. Reed," before returning to a stream of jargon clearly meant to exclude me. "Julian, you're just so brilliant." Clara looked at him with undisguised worship. "Dad, you're so lucky to be getting a son-in-law like him." When the bill came, Julian made a great performance of taking it, waving away my attempt to split it with a dismissive gesture. "Please, Mr. Reed, this is my pleasure." His eyes locked with mine, full of smug triumph. "I can more than afford it." Outside, I got into a waiting taxi while Julian escorted Clara to his sleek silver Porsche. Through the taxi's back window, I saw him kiss her on the forehead, his soft laughter floating on the humid Miami air like a taunt. My hands balled into fists in my lap as the city lights streaked by. Something was terribly, terribly wrong with Julian Croft. Sleep was a lost cause. I lay awake in the soulless hotel room until nearly midnight, replaying every condescending remark, every calculated insult, every single moment Julian had belittled me in front of my own daughter. Finally, I surrendered and moved to the small desk, still in my rumpled dinner clothes. The hotel's Wi-Fi password was on a sticker on the lamp. I flipped open my laptop and stared at the blinking cursor, not even sure what to search for. "Julian Croft," I typed. The first results were all polished LinkedIn profiles and mentions in minor tech publications, all backing up his story. It was too perfect. I dug deeper, adding Miami to the search terms. On the fourth page, something new appeared. A corporate filing for Croft Innovative Solutions, registered just 7 months prior. The listed address was a mailbox rental store. I tried. Julian Croft fraud. The screen refreshed, and then it was full of legal documents. Dallas County District Court. Case number DC 2024-5543. Julian M. Croft, named as defendant in a civil action for breach of fiduciary duty, wire fraud, and securities fraud. A court case in Dallas. Investment fraud, I whispered into the silent. room. My hands shook as I clicked through the PDFs of legal filings. The plaintiff was a woman named Olivia Garza, age 32, who had given Julian $220,000 for what she was told were investments in AI startups. Her photo showed a woman with kind, trusting eyes that looked disturbingly like Clara's. I searched Julian Croft Dallas victims. More names surfaced. Chloe Kim, $110,000. Megan O'Connell, $300,000. It was always the same story. Ambitious, successful young women. Always the same pitch about exclusive investment deals. Always the same outcome of financial ruin. Julian Croft accused of defrauding investors of over $300,000. I read the headline from a local news site, my voice hoarse. But it was the photo gallery attached to the article that made my blood run cold. Julian with Olivia at what was clearly an engagement party. Julian with Chloe at a candlelit dinner. Julian with Megan, her left hand held up to the camera, showing off a diamond ring that was identical to Clara's. I spent the next 4 hours printing every document I could find. Court records, news articles, online testimonials, police reports. The hotel's business center printer whirred nonstop as I assembled a mountain of damning evidence. Each page uncovered a new layer of his deception. Julian had used at least 2 other last names, Vance and Sterling. He specialized in finding his targets on high-end dating apps, creating a detailed persona of a brilliant self-made tech mogul. The engagement period was always 6 to 7 months, just long enough to gain their complete trust and access their finances. By 5 a.m., the desk was a mess of empty coffee cups and scattered papers. The evidence was laid out across every surface: photos of Julian's other victims, screenshots of fake investment portfolios, heartbreaking statements from their families. My God, what is he planning for my daughter? The question hung in the stale, air-conditioned room. Outside, Miami was beginning to stir. Delivery trucks rumbled down the streets. Early risers were out for a run, normal people starting their normal days. As my world was imploding, I sorted the documents into separate manila folders, one for each victim. Olivia's file was the thickest. She had pursued Julian in court for nearly 2 years before her resources ran out. Chloe had tried to create a website to warn others until Julian's lawyers threatened her into silence. Megan had vanished from the internet entirely. The last document I found made me feel physically ill. It was a psychological assessment compiled by an FBI task force on financial crimes. The subject demonstrates classic traits of narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathic tendencies, showing a particular aptitude for exploiting emotional bonds for financial gain. Dawn was breaking through the hotel blinds as I stacked the files. My phone read 6:47 a.m. Clara would be getting up for work soon, maybe humming a wedding song while Julian lay beside her, plotting his final move. I picked up my phone, my hand steady. The time for keeping secrets was over. Valentine's Day dawned with a perfect, cloudless Miami sky. The irony was not lost on me as I laid out Julian's history of deceit across the hotel desk like a grim deck of cards. Every single document told the exact same story: seduction, manipulation, and utter financial devastation. I called Clara's number at exactly 7:15 a.m., knowing she would be up but hoping Julian was still asleep. She picked up on the second ring, her voice filled with the unique cheer of a bride-to-be just weeks from her wedding day. "Good morning? Dad, did you get some rest? Wasn't dinner incredible?" The pure joy in her voice made what I had to do feel 10 times worse. "Clara, I need to talk to you about something serious. Can you sit down? I'm just getting my things for work, but what's going on? You sound awful." I clutched Olivia Garza's court filing in my hand, drawing a grim strength from another family's pain. "Clara, Julian asked me for $75,000 for the wedding. You said he was a millionaire." A long, brittle silence stretched over the line. "You're lying. Julian would never do that without telling me." Her voice was laced with disbelief. "Honey, he claimed his funds were tied up and he needed the money to pay the venue. He made me swear not to tell you. That's ridiculous." Julian shows me his portfolio statements all the time. He's worth over $3 million. He has a pending court case. For fraud? Honey, I have the documents in front of me. Dallas County, case number DC 2024-5543. He defrauded a woman named Olivia Garza. I heard a muffled sound in the background. Julian's voice asking who she was talking to. Clara's breathing became shaky. "You're just making this up because you can't handle the fact that I'm happy. You hate that I've found someone and don't need you anymore. Clara, please, just let me show you the evidence. There are other victims. Chloe, Kim, Megan O'Connell. He's a serial con artist." The phone was suddenly snatched away. Julian's silky voice took over. "Mr. Reed, I can appreciate your concern, but these allegations are entirely baseless. I was fully exonerated of all those charges in Dallas. The case is still active, Julian. I'm looking at the current docket. You're looking at old, misleading information spread by bitter ex-business associates. Clara knows the truth about my finances." In the background, I could hear my daughter starting to cry. Julian's tone softened, becoming a manipulative purr. "Honey, your father is trying to drive a wedge between us. It's sad, but some parents just can't let go. Let me speak to Clara." My voice was harder than I meant it to be. She's far too distraught right now. These vicious lies have deeply wounded her. Clara's voice broke through, sharp with anguish and fury. "How could you do this? How could you make up lies about the man I love just to ruin my wedding? I'm not lying. There are pictures of him with other fiancées, all wearing rings identical to yours. Enough. You can't stand that I've found someone who loves me for me, not for who you think I should be." I made one last attempt, my own voice cracking. "Clara, I'm begging you, just look at what I found before you walk down that aisle. I'm emailing everything to you this second. Don't you dare come to my wedding. I mean it. You have chosen to believe these fantasies over your own daughter." The line went dead. I sat staring at my phone. The evidence of Julian's crime spread. Around me like the wreckage of a 28-year relationship. Outside the hotel window, couples strolled hand in hand to Valentine's Day breakfasts, completely unaware of the war that had just been lost in room 722. The email I'd threatened to send remained a draft, my finger frozen over the send button. Julian had won. He had successfully twisted my concern into control, my love into an attack. But fathers don't surrender that easily. 1 month had passed since that devastating Valentine's Day call. 31 days of pacing my Chicago apartment like a prisoner in his own cell. The manila folders of evidence sat on my dining table, their corners curled from the steam of countless cups of coffee and the weight of my sleepless nights. Each day started the same, checking my phone for a call or text that never arrived, gazing at Clara's smiling photo until my vision blurred. The pile of unsent letters on my desk grew, all starting with "My dearest Clara" and ending as crumpled balls in the trash. Eleanor's photo watched from the mantel as I opened Julian's court records for what felt like the 1,000th time. Had I been too aggressive, too paranoid? The internet wasn't always reliable, was it? Photos could be faked. Legal documents could be misread. Maybe I'm the one who's wrong. "She's an adult," I whispered to the silent apartment. My neighbors were starting to notice. Mrs. Gable, from across the hall, left a message saying I looked unwell. The postal worker asked if I was out of town, gesturing to the stack of mail in my box. My own doctor's office had called about a checkup. I didn't remember making, but today was different. Today was May 19th, and tomorrow my only daughter would marry Julian Croft, whether I was there to see it or not. I picked up Eleanor's silver frame, tracing her smile. "Eleanor, what should I do?" Her eyes in the photograph seemed to give me the answer I needed. Sometimes loving someone means letting them make their own mistakes. Maybe the court records were a misunderstanding. Maybe the other women were lying. Maybe Julian did love Clara, and my own paternal jealousy had poisoned my thinking. What father ever truly thinks someone is good enough for his daughter? Maybe the articles are fake news, I said to myself, finally closing the folders. By midday, my mind was made up. I would fly to the wedding, offer my sincere blessing, and begin the long process of repairing the bond my accusations had shattered. The elegant jewelry store on Michigan Avenue greeted me warmly. It was the same place I'd bought Eleanor's engagement ring 3 decades ago. The wedding gift I chose cost a small fortune, a vintage Tiffany necklace with diamonds that sparkled like captured sunlight. The clerk wrapped it in the iconic blue box with a simple card, "For my daughter on her wedding day. With all my love, Dad." At O'Hare, I held the gift box on my lap, mentally rehearsing the apology I'd prepared on the way to the airport. I would tell Clara I was wrong. I would tell her Julian was a fine man. I would tell her all I ever wanted was her happiness. The plane ascended into the evening sky, leaving Chicago's lights behind like scattered embers. I was flying towards what I prayed would be a reconciliation. I closed my eyes, trying to picture tomorrow's wedding not as an end, but as a new beginning. Maybe a father could learn to trust his daughter's heart, even when it led her somewhere that frightened him. The Biltmore Miami stood before me like a grand palace of coral and stone, its entrance adorned with tasteful banners for the Reed-Croft wedding. I stepped out of the taxi, clutching the blue Tiffany box. My heart pounded as I straightened my navy suit, the very one I'd worn when I walked her across the stage at her university graduation. Guests in fine silks and sharp tuxedos streamed into the hotel lobby, their cheerful chatter mingling with the elegant notes of a string quartet warming up inside. I saw a few people I knew, Clara's best friend from college, my cousin Mark from Atlanta, our old neighbors from when we lived in Evanston. And then I saw it, my own face looking back at me from a large framed poster on a decorative easel next to the main doors. Beneath the professionally shot photograph, a message in flowing script delivered a brutal public blow. Entry forbidden. Samuel Reed, by explicit request of the bride and groom. The gift box nearly fell from my suddenly weak hands. Other guests slowed as they approached, their eyes flicking from the sign to me, a flicker of uncomfortable recognition on their faces, before they hurried inside. A few gave me looks of pity, realizing the man in the photo was the one standing right there on the sidewalk. "Sir, I'm afraid I have to ask you to leave." A security guard appeared at my side, his tone polite but firm. His name tag read, Rodriguez. Maybe he was a father too. This is my daughter's wedding." The words felt foreign and choked in my throat, barely audible over the lobby's cheerful sounds. Rodriguez looked genuinely sorry, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "I understand, sir, but my instructions are very clear." The couple insisted on this arrangement. Through the grand glass doors, I could see the ballroom being readied, massive arrangements of white orchids, tables set with gleaming silver and crystal. My $75,000 had created a beautiful fantasy, one I was now banished from. Guests continued to flow past, their conversations dropping to hushed whispers as they glanced at the poster of the unwelcome father. Some looked truly stunned. These were people who had known me for Clara's entire life, people who had celebrated her birthdays and achievements alongside me. I placed the Tiffany box on the ground next to my own portrait, the iconic blue Stark against the polished travertine floor. The diamonds inside would look magnificent on Clara's neck if she ever decided to open the gift. "I see now, Julian. I see everything." Rodriguez took a small step back, perhaps sensing a change in my demeanor, but the anger was gone. What I felt was something colder, clearer. This wasn't a simple rejection. It was a calculated act of public humiliation designed to destroy any shred of dignity I had left. Julian hadn't just won Clara. He had branded me as a toxic father, unfit to witness his own daughter's marriage. That poster would ensure that everyone, our family, our friends, complete strangers, knew exactly how thoroughly I had been exiled. I adjusted my tie and gave a curt nod to Rodriguez. Could you get me a taxi, please? I need to get to the City National Bank downtown before it closes. The security guard seemed relieved. Yes, sir. Right away. As I waited for the cab, I took one last look at my own face on that poster. The man in that photograph had still held out a sliver of hope that his daughter might see the truth, might choose her father over a manipulator's lies. That man had been a fool, but he was learning fast. The taxi dropped me at the downtown Miami branch of City National Bank at exactly 4:30 p.m., with the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the building's modern facade. Inside, the Saturday staff moved with the relaxed pace of people, watching the clock. I walked to the customer service counter with the same focused calm I used to bring to high-stakes sales negotiations. The young woman at the desk, her name tag read Maria, looked up with a practiced smile. Good afternoon, sir. How can I assist you? I laid my driver's license and bank documents on the cool marble countertop. I need to issue an immediate stop. Payment on a check. Maria's fingers danced over her keyboard, accessing my account. Of course, sir. Do you have the check number and the amount? Check number 4481 for $75,000, made out to Julian Croft. I spelled the name for her, watching her type it into the system. Sir, I should inform you that if this check has already been presented for payment, this action could cause significant issues for the payee. Her voice was cautious, the tone of someone used to navigating messy divorces and soured business deals. I looked her directly in the eye. That's precisely the outcome I'm hoping for. A glimmer of understanding crossed her face. She had seen this movie before, jilted lovers, swindled partners, family dramas that played out in financial transactions. She produced the official stop payment documents without another question. There is a $35 fee for this service, and the stop order will be effective immediately. Any attempt to cash or deposit this check will be automatically rejected. Excellent. I signed the forms with the same steady hand I had used to sign Julian's check. The symmetry was not lost on me. The stop payment is confirmed, Mr. Reed. Here is your confirmation slip and a copy for your records. Maria passed the paperwork to me with the quiet efficiency of someone who knew that sometimes the best response required a paper trail. I folded the receipt and tucked it into my wallet, right beside a small, faded photo of Clara on her graduation day. Somewhere across town, Julian was likely finalizing the last details of the reception, supremely confident that his suppliers would be paid, that his masterpiece of deception was reaching its triumphant conclusion. By now, the ceremony itself was probably underway. Clara would be walking down an aisle of white rose petals, surrounded by guests who had all seen my face on that shameful poster. The string quartet would be playing, the photographer capturing every staged moment of bliss. But in a few short hours, when the caterers presented their final bill and the florist's invoice came due, Julian would find that his main line of credit had been severed. The man who built his life on manipulating other people's finances was about to discover what happens when the money runs out. "Will there be anything else for you today, Mr. Reed?" Maria asked. "No, thank you. You've been a tremendous help." I walked out of the cool, air-conditioned bank into the warm Florida afternoon, the confirmation receipt in my pocket feeling like a perfectly timed weapon. Behind me, the bank's digital systems were already at work, flagging check 4481 as null and void, preparing to deliver a very public, very expensive humiliation to Julian Croft at his own stolen wedding. The cab ride to the airport was quiet and satisfying. Sometimes the most effective form of justice is simply to pull the financial rug out from under a liar's feet. 2 hours had gone by since I left the bank, and somewhere in Miami, my daughter was likely enjoying her first dance as Mrs. Julian Croft. I sat in my hotel room, the city lights below twinkling like a carpet of jewels. The stop payment receipt in my wallet feeling like a declaration of war. The Biltmore's grand ballroom would be aglow with candles now, the quartet playing something classical and romantic as Clara was spun across the floor in a dress bought with my money. The thought should have broken my heart. Instead, I felt a cold, clear sense of purpose. My phone buzzed, a text from my cousin Mark. "Gorgeous wedding. Sorry you're not here." Another buzz. "Credit card terminal is down." Odd. That text was from an unknown number, likely a vendor. The third message brought a grim smile to my face. "Julian looks like he's about to be sick." At the reception, Julian would be confidently approaching the vice banquet manager, ready to settle the bill for the lavish dinner. He'd pull out the same platinum credit card he had brandished at our disastrous dinner, the one that would now be met with the sharp, unforgiving beep of a decline. "Mr. Croft, we'll need to see immediate payment before we can proceed with dessert." Service. The manager's voice would be polite but unyielding. I knew how these things worked. Julian would try again, blaming a technical glitch, asking to run it a different way. When that failed, he'd try his other cards, each one already pushed to its limit by his other schemes. Each new rejection, a fresh humiliation in front of the staff. "This is impossible. There must be a mistake," he'd sputter, a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the ballroom's perfect temperature. By then, the band would have fallen silent, their own payment having been rejected. The photographer would be discreetly packing his gear, citing a clause in his contract that required payment on the day of service. The florist would be quietly instructing her team to begin clearing the extravagant centerpieces, cutting her losses on a client who clearly couldn't pay. "Julian, what's going on? Why is everything stopping?" Clara's voice would be thin with confusion and rising alarm. The guests would be noticing, their murmurs growing louder. Wealthy friends and relatives would be watching, aghast as the fairy tale wedding was systematically deconstructed around them. Social media would quickly pivot from posts of congratulations to live documentation of a spectacular public failure. "Your father did this. He sabotaged us. He ruined our wedding." Julian's voice would be shrill, his carefully crafted composure shattering under the immense pressure. But I wasn't there to see his downfall. I was thousands of miles away, a cup of room service coffee untouched beside me, as my phone began to light up with a relentless barrage of calls from a number I knew was Julian's. Call after call, each one more frantic than the last. I ignored them all. 81 missed calls. I counted them, watching the red notification bubble on my screen swell with each new attempt. Julian's name was a constant presence, but now Clara's smiling face began to appear in the call log, her picture a desperate signal flashing between his attempts. The voicemails painted a picture of the chaos I had set in motion, but could not see. Julian's first message, left at 7:15 p.m., still had a hint of his usual arrogance. "Mr. Reed, it appears there's a temporary issue with the bank's network. Please give me a call." By message number 15, the facade was cracking. "Sir, I need you to call your bank right now. This is a matter of extreme urgency." Message 37 was pure panic. "Please, Mr. Reed, the entire wedding is collapsing. There has been a catastrophic mistake." I poured a small glass of whiskey from the hotel minibar and sat in the armchair by the window. Chicago's lights glittered far below, while across the country, Julian's fraudulent empire was imploding in real time. The messages grew more and more unhinged. I could hear the background noise now, angry vendors, confused guests, the sound of a beautiful party being dismantled. Julian's voice was strained as he pleaded, then threatened, then finally started to confess. "I know how this looks, but I can fix this. The money, yes, I needed a loan, but I was always going to pay you back. Please, you're making your daughter cry." Message 68 was different. It wasn't Julian's desperate pleading. It was Clara's voice, broken and quiet. Dad, please. Julian. Told me everything. I put down my whiskey and stared at the phone. This was the moment of victory I had engineered, but the sound of my daughter's pain was a sharp, unexpected blow. The 82nd call came at 9:43 p.m. This time, I answered. Dad? Clara's voice was a mere whisper. Everything? What exactly did he tell you? About the money, about the debts, about the other women. Each word sounded like it was being torn from her. You were right. You were right about all of it. The lawsuits, the lies, everything. Through the phone, I could hear Julian in the background, his voice high and thin. She's misunderstanding. I love her. The money is irrelevant. I'm coming back to Miami, I said, my voice steady. But I am not paying for a single thing. After what you both did, the poster, the humiliation, my checkbook is closed. I understand, Dad. Just please come. I need you. Pack a bag, honey. We'll sort out the rest when I get there. After I hung up, I booked the first flight back to Florida. Outside my window, Chicago was quiet, unaware that thousands of miles away, justice had finally caught up with Julian Croft. Sometimes the best revenge isn't an attack, but simply removing the lies that hold a person up and letting them collapse under their own weight. 3 months later, the summer heat was radiating from the Chicago pavement as I heard the sound of familiar footsteps on the stairs to my apartment. I looked through the peephole and saw Clara, standing there with 2 battered suitcases, her face thinner, but her eyes clear and resolute. She looked more like herself than she had in months. I swung the door open before she even had a chance to knock. Dad, I'm so sorry. You were right about absolutely everything. The words came out in a rush as she fell into my arms, sobbing like she did when she was a little girl and had scraped her knee. Honey, you're my daughter. We will get through this. I led her to the couch, the same one where this entire ordeal had started with that fateful video call. Everything felt different now. The evidence folders were gone, handed over to the FBI, but Eleanor's photo still smiled down at us from the mantel. He took everything. My condo, my savings. He even pawned my grandmother's necklace. Clara's voice was thick with shame and exhaustion. After the wedding disaster, he got desperate. He started forging my signature on documents, draining accounts I didn't even know he had access to. The TV was on in the background, the evening news playing quietly. Suddenly, Julian's face was on the screen, not the polished, handsome photo from his fake websites, but a raw, unflattering mugshot. His hair was a mess, and his signature smirk was gone, replaced by the empty gaze of a man who had finally been caught. Julian Croft arrested on multiple counts of federal wire fraud, the news anchor reported in a calm, professional voice. Investigators allege he operated a sophisticated romance scam, defrauding victims in several states of more than $3 million. Clara stared at the screen, then looked at me. They interviewed me last week. I wasn't the only one, was I? Olivia Garza, Chloe Kim, Megan O'Connell. I recited the names of the women whose stories I had printed out in that lonely Miami hotel room. You weren't his first, honey, but you are going to be his last. The news report continued, laying out details that confirmed every one of my suspicions, the multiple aliases, the fake investment reports, the clear pattern of targeting successful women, gaining their trust, and then systematically liquidating their assets over a 6-month period. Julian is going to pay for what he did. There will be justice, I said, pulling my daughter into a hug. The federal case had come together quickly once Julian's world had collapsed. The evidence I had gathered that night in February had given them a starting point, but it was Julian's own panicked, reckless actions after the failed wedding that had sealed his fate. When you build a life on a foundation of lies, the truth always finds a way to break through when you're weakest. I testified before the grand jury, Clara said, her voice stronger now. They think he'll get at least 15 years. Outside, Chicago hummed along, a city full of normal families having dinner, doing homework, living the kind of simple, honest lives I had so desperately envied during the worst of this. "What do we do now?" Clara asked. I looked around my apartment, the place that had been my sanctuary. Then I looked at my daughter, older, wiser, and scarred, but whole. "Now we start over, together." From the mantel, Eleanor's photograph seemed to radiate approval. "Sometimes protecting the ones you love requires you to make choices that they will hate you for. But in the end, love is resilient, the truth is powerful, and justice, when it finally arrives, is sweeter than any revenge." If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.